Welcome to the 2020 Presidential Race Review. I'm your host, Jessica Kwong. The election has happened. We now have a president-elect, Joe Biden, and we are still in the process of doing the final counts from states. Donald Trump is contesting it. He's filing various lawsuits, has not conceded yet, but overall America is now recognized that Joe Biden is the next president. And now I have two guests back with me from earlier shows, Republican speechwriter Lisa Schiffren and also historian and Columbia University lecturer David Eisenbach, who's a Democrat. Thank you both so much for joining me for two parts of this episode to unpack the results and aftermath of the election.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So great to have you back. And I wanted to start off by focusing on Donald Trump. So he still has not conceded. Do you think he should concede, or should he wait for all of these lawsuits to go through the process? Some of them seem like they don't have merit. Lisa, let's start with you since you're the Republican.
Well, I certainly think he shouldn't pursue meritless lawsuits, but I think there are going to be a bunch of lawsuits that have plenty of merit. And I think it's very, very important in our country that we have a very clear sense, and that, you know, half the country, 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump, many of whom don't believe this was a particularly honest election. It's very important that the data come out to resolve that. Because if it was honest, that's good. Then we have a result and it's clear and we don't have to question the system. And if it wasn't honest, and I think we probably, not all, but most want to know that. I think he should pursue the lawsuits. This happens all the time. I mean, this is not this scale and this fact where the media declared the other guy the winner. That's the thing we've never seen before. Not that there's some contention about vote totals in states and districts.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lisa, do you think that he should not concede until it's final? Doesn't matter if it's past Inauguration Day, or, you know, do you think it's okay if he never concedes at all? Because earlier he said that he didn't agree to a peaceful transition. So
No, he didn't say that. He said he wanted to see the actual results. He never said that. That's kind of the media canard that has been put out there for 4 years to make him look like a fool.
And he said it during a debate.
Well, what he said was that he wasn't going to concede based on his point in every instance where he said that, I believe, was that he wanted to see real totals. And he has said entirely through this past week that if he's lost, then he will leave graciously. He will concede and leave. And, I believe that. And I don't want a tyrant in the White House. I also don't want somebody who got there by fraud. So we're between a rock and a hard place here. I think Donald Trump, I cannot imagine that either he or any of the people around him will force this into something it isn't, if he lost. But I do think we want to see what comes at the end of the process. Most of us were alive in 2000 when we had a conflict over Florida that determined the election. And nobody jumped the gun. The media did not decide it was their job to declare Al Gore the president or George Bush the president. We let the process play out. And it seems to me that's the appropriate thing to do. Well, and really, as for Inauguration Day, no, it will be resolved before then. We have a large system in place, not the media, to take care of these problems. Everything will go full speed ahead and it will all be resolved probably by early December. The 13th, I believe, is the deadline.
Well, I do think you're right in saying that it's very clear that most of the media is behind Joe Biden, and maybe that had a play in the media calling it for Joe Biden. But I do think that's a problem. I think that somehow, hopefully, in the next election, it wouldn't be that way. What do you think about the way that Donald Trump is handling this? Do you think he's handling it as a sore loser, trying to file all these lawsuits, or is he doing it exactly the way that he should be doing and fighting it till the very end? That's what he promised his supporters.
Well, maybe a little bit of both. He's definitely a sore loser, blaming everybody for his loss. Even in one rant, talking about pipes breaking in Fulton County and how that's thrown off the vote count in some way, as if that's responsible for his loss. So what's amazing to me is how irrelevant his lack of concession is. No one seems to care. The whole system is moving on without him. And the Secret Service now is protecting Joe Biden as if he was president-elect, and it won't even matter when Donald Trump finally concedes. Even if he doesn't concede, it won't matter.
But you do want to know if there's been fraud, and this is not the actual outcome that we should.
Until I see a substantial allegation of fraud, right?
That's all we're talking about.
I can't believe there was fraud.
No, that's what we're talking about.
There wasn't enough in terms of the numbers of votes in any of these allegations to turn any state. So,
maybe that's true. And if so, I'm sure the Trump administration will exit as gracefully as possible. He's not a graceful man.
No, he's not.
Not his strength.
He's not a good
one. No, he's not. He's a fighter. And you probably don't get both of those things in the same person unless they are a truly adept actor.
Well, he's a man-child, and he's a narcissist, and he will not go graciously. He will not concede.
I don't know if you've worked in Washington, but you could throw a ball in any direction and hit a narcissist. Everybody in Washington is a narcissist, including most of the staff. It's part of the, it's a professional requirement, I think.
Well, one thing I thought was very interesting is in the final rallies leading up to the election, in various rallies, Donald Trump told his supporters that, if he doesn't win X state, if I don't win Michigan or whichever state he was in, that you may never see me again, that I may actually leave the country. Was that a good thing for him to say, or was he betting on saying something like that to get people to vote for him? I mean, now I think he's in an interesting position because what does he do? What would you do if you were in his shoes?
I'd be curious to see what country he goes to. Judging by the reaction of world leaders boldly and very uproariously celebrating Joe Biden's victory, where does Trump go? One interesting thing is Putin has yet to congratulate Biden, so maybe Trump can go over.
Neither has the president of Mexico. I mean, there are a bunch of leaders who haven't. You've only seen the ones who have. They all make their own calculations, some based on affinity, some based on some political calculation, whatever. We have a legal system, thank God for this sort of thing. Where does he go? I don't know. And I doubt he'll leave unless as AOC and the squad keep promising, there are, I would say, illegitimate prosecutions for random fantasy crimes that Trump is alleged to have committed.
Well, Trump has said that, Trump, or at least his advisors, the people who support him, have said that he's planning to run in 2024. Do you think he's actually going to do that? And will he have the support from Republicans to run in 2024?
I don't know who said that. I haven't heard it, and I don't believe it because he will be old. I simply don't believe it. I mean, I think there will be a crop of Republicans, some of whom will be not like Trump, and some of whom will be politically like Trump. Policy-wise, I just don't believe that he'll do that. I think that's you asked before about those rallies. I watched some of those rallies at midnight on some random November night. He was rambling. He was it was late and he was just chatting. And I think taking that seriously, taking that literally is actually kind of a thing that's been done all too often. I mean, there are many things Joe Biden has said over the years, which, if taken literally, really should have made him box office poison.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I am curious to see in what direction does the Republican Party go. What are the lessons? And Lisa, curious your thoughts. What are the lessons for the Republican Party going forward after Trump? Where do they go?
Okay, well, here's the most interesting thing about this election that nobody talks about. Donald Trump got more Black votes, more Latino votes, and more working class votes than any Republican in our lifetime, than any Republican for 50, 75 years. It is very, very clear that the class issue in party affiliation has flipped. The Democrats are the party of the poor and the elites, and the Republican Party, certainly under Trump, with this kind of populist economics and focus on, he uses the phrase America first, but really it's bringing back jobs, bringing back factories, not exporting our entire economy to China. that is something that's very, very important to tens of millions of Americans, certainly including many of our new immigrants, including the white working class, the Rust Belt, people who've been out of work for years. It is a crucial thing. So I think the Republican Party would be very, very foolish to veer back away from that toward the country clubs and Wall Street itself.
Well, I think that a lot of Republicans were actually pleased with what Trump delivered. He made do on a lot of his promises, all of them not the border wall, but people I think knew what to expect with Trump. And I think with Biden, it's sort of, some people may not know what to expect. So maybe people voted for what they knew they were going to get. And it will be very interesting to see what other Republican leader they will come up with in 4 years.
To Lisa's point, if Trump won, the story of this election would have been Latinos putting Trump over the top. Mm-hmm. And I think that would have been a shock. I think I'm shocked by it, by how well he did with Latinos. But that would now make the Republican Party, right, have to really think about what are their policies on immigration and how can we expand our Latino vote? Because the fact of the matter is that is a growing part of the electorate, particularly in the Sun Belt states like Texas. So the Republican Party might want to really seize on that as an opening.
I just want to say the Republican Party has thought about the Latino vote successfully and unsuccessfully at various times since Reagan. And there's an awful lot of data that says that there are, first of all, the Latino vote is, I mean, what does it even mean to say that? It's Cubans are not Puerto Ricans or not Salvadorans, and they have different interests. And those interests certainly, I mean, immigration, for instance, people who got here legally are not necessarily thrilled with people who come illegally. And people who come and work for nothing, undermine people who come here and build businesses and save money and put their kids through college, and regardless of where you're from. So there are a bunch of issues that you'd want to take apart there. I don't know.
I just wish that the Republican Party would back away from Trump's oftentimes racist remarks, certainly dismissive, generalizing about immigrants, and embrace a more accepting, warming, positive policy. And
well, the Republican Party did that for decades, and then we got 30 million illegals. And all of a sudden, that end of the Reagan era policy that allowed, that gave everybody, I forget what you call it, but, immunity, that then brought in a huge wave problem. I think Republicans by and large embrace legal immigrants and are not so thrilled to have, the borders determined by people who want to come here. Everybody wants to come here. There's almost no country on earth from which people don't want to come. And that's great. But really, it seems to me that it's important that we control who gets in, as Australia and Canada and New Zealand and many other countries do. So I started off as an open borders person. And now I just think, no, you have to control your borders the way you control. If you want to have a welfare state, which we do, nobody wants to give up Medicare and Medicaid and welfare and whatever. You can't have both. You have to actually, be in control of your population to some extent.
We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with more 2020 presidential race review.
There's a way to stop the spread of coronavirus. There's a way to protect others. There's a way to keep your family safe. New York figured it out. The answer weighs less than an ounce. It's not a heavy lift. Be New York tough. Mask up, America.
New York is the canary in the coal mine. What happens to New York is going to wind up happening in your city and in your community. We are going to fight every way we can to save every life that we can. We are all first responders. Your actions can either save or endanger a life. Job one has to be save lives. That has to be the priority.
Welcome back to the 2020 Presidential Race Review. I'm your host, Jessica Kwong. I'm still here with David Eisenbach. He's a historian and lecturer at Columbia University, and also Republican speechwriter Lisa Schiffren. We are here unpacking the results of the 2020 election. We now have a president-elect, Joe Biden, and we're still waiting for the official word, but as far as we know, he is going to be taking the White House in January. Thank you so much for joining me and helping me unpack this very, very wild election. Well, I wanted to ask a little bit about Joe Biden and what's happening right now. So he's already appointed a coronavirus task force, transitions on the way. He's going to be issuing a bunch of executive orders from my understanding. Do you think that this is going to pretty much undo almost everything that happened with the Trump administration? And also on that note, do you think that that Trump is going to have any sort of legacy, or is he going to be irrelevant from now on?
Oh, those are big questions.
I think he's trying to undo every single thing. He said that, executive orders, they will undo pretty much every policy that was put into place that way. That wasn't legislated.
When Obama, right? Tried to undo this. Oh, when Trump came in, he tried to undo almost everything Obama had done. It's back and forth.
Yes, I think this is, we have a very divided country, and the two parties reflect a very clear division on what we should do. So I don't think that should apply to COVID, because in theory, that's not so political unless you wish to use it politically. But climate change, that was the second big piece that he brought out today. He will undo, we will no longer be energy independent. That kind of dance about fracking and oil and natural gas, nope, that's over. 40% of the budget for climate change goes to minority areas, because it's not just climate change, it's climate justice. I mean, $2 trillion for climate change when we don't have a clue how to actually affect it. Okay. Yes, I do not think Trump's legacy will be irrelevant, because I think that if the Republicans hold the Senate, it won't all be undone. But yes, it's just going to be, back and forth until some of these issues are in fact resolved.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Senate is going to really determine the success of the Biden administration. The potential, if the Democrats were to get the Senate, and remember, it's going to be decided by these two runoff races on January 5th in Georgia, with a fired up Democratic base, a flood of money, Democratic money going down there. There's a decent chance that they can get the Senate. Now, if they do that, with the tie-breaking vote being Kamala Harris, then they can make Puerto Rico a state, Washington, D.C. a state. They can pass a kind of healthcare reform to bolster Obamacare. Really, the possibilities are pretty endless. If they don't get those two runoffs, if they lose just one and the Republicans hold the Senate, well, Mitch McConnell has demonstrated that he's the master of sabotage and stonewalling. Biden's not going to get his judges through. He's going to even have trouble, with some cabinet appointments potentially, and no legislation he's going to get through the Senate, going to get past Mitch.
No, there's another way of looking at that I read this morning, where somebody pointed out that a senior Democrat, the Democratic Party is divided down the middle now. There is a moderate or more or less, center-left faction. And in theory, that's the faction that Joe Biden represents. And then there's a hard left faction. So yeah, sure. If the Democrats hold the Senate, they can pass all of these. They can, in fact, make Puerto Rico and DC states. There will never be another Republican elected. There will never be another Republican Senate. And that's great. There goes your country, and welcome Venezuela. However, if the Republicans hold the Senate, Mitch McConnell is not crazy. I mean, and he's a master player but one possibility is, if in fact there are moderate Democrats in the cabinet and in the administration coming to actual resolutions that require compromise on both sides. So that is your best case scenario. I don't believe it either. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, just from what I'm hearing from Ted Cruz and that Senate, that Republican Senate is not going to go along with Joe Biden's agenda in any way. And you know, another thing the Democrats can do if they get the majority, they can get rid of the filibuster. And you're right? I mean, we're talking like this is a historic change where Biden can really direct the future of America, but he's only going to be able to do it if he has the Senate. Without the Senate, then it's going to be 4 years of stonewalling.
Well, I think there's an awful lot of damage he can do using, you know, the agencies, using the administrative state. Certainly Obama did that. I think there's an awful lot of damage he can, I mean, he's in charge of all foreign policy. There are entire realms of policy that the president and his secretaries have, you know, have complete control over. So I think even without the Senate, we'll have plenty of leeway to either make people happy or make them miserable. You know, the Senate, it'd be okay for there to be a break on this, but we'll see. That's up to the people of Georgia.
Well, Lisa, I know that you're happy with several things that Trump delivered. David, do you think that there's anything that Trump did during his tenure that is something that was good and was good for the country and that he will be remembered by as, you know, in a bipartisan manner, that this was a good thing that he did for the country?
Look, I mean, I had high hopes that he was going to drain the swamp, and he didn't. He surrendered his administration to Wall Street. These phony trade wars didn't actually get any ground whatsoever regarding intellectual property with China, and we certainly didn't get, you know, jobs shipped back over here. I think that wound up hurting Trump in Erie, and that's a shame that he didn't really go with the populism that got him elected in 2016.
So nothing?
There's a lot of data that says that isn't correct, but I wouldn't argue about that. So you know what? I'm surprised you didn't mention as an actual positive, Middle East peace, a changed Middle East where Israel and a bunch of Arab countries move toward normalcy. That seems to me huge. And the fact that it was studiously ignored by the media and the political class because they didn't want it to benefit Trump is actually appalling. But, you know, that's a thing nobody I know ever expected to see in their lifetime. And if it goes forward as it appears to be doing, that's fabulous.
What about avoiding nuclear warfare and North Korea?
Well, that wasn't something that was going to happen. That was just a charge against him, as fabulous as all the others.
Yes, unfortunately, North Korea has continued to build nuclear weapons and develop their missiles. So Trump's little love fest with Kim Jong-un got us nowhere closer to solving the problem of Korea.
You know, the problem of Korea is entirely a problem of China, right? Everything Kim does can be stopped yesterday by Xi. If Xi were upset and didn't want to use them as a cat's paw, it would stop. So that's a big conflict. And in my lifetime, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama have screwed it up royally. So I have precisely, I'm certainly not holding it against anybody that they didn't solve it in 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask again about Donald Trump. So what do you think he should do for the next 4 years? I mean, he has a movement behind him now. I mean, it's going to be very curious to see what he does, but should he try to continue staying in politics, or if every time he tweets something, nobody's going to listen to him anyway because he's, you know, hasn't won re-election?
One of the pieces of gossip out there is that he'll start a media network, which I think would be a fine thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and it would give him the platform. He does enjoy being in front of the camera, and so, you know, it would kind of be like the power of influence, which I think he would actually pretty much embrace. Mm-hmm.
Do either of you have any final thoughts about the election? There's still a lot to unpack, but what are sort of the takeaways that you get from what happened this time around?
I think our country is very close to breaking, and I do not see Joe Biden as any kind of healer. I see him as a puppet, and I think things are going to get worse before they get better. That's my takeaway. And you know what? That would be my takeaway if Donald Trump had won too.
My takeaway was the country is surprisingly calm, despite the fact that we have a president who hasn't conceded, despite the fact that at one point we had two presidential candidates both declaring victory on election night. What's surprising to me is that we don't have blood in the streets, that the system has worked. Yes, it's got
Republicans
flaws.
don't riot.
It's taking a long
Republicans
time.
don't riot. If Republicans rioted, there'd be riots.
But there's
Certainly, if Trump had won, there'd be riots now, right?
Sure, there would have
Everybody
been.
in America stocked up on tuna fish because they were afraid they wouldn't leave their. And everybody in America has vast stores of ammunition at the moment. Not me. I live in New York, but
right. And they didn't bring out the guns because their guy lost, and that is a good thing. I was kind of shocked. I'm sort of shocked
it was
that we
never.
managed to avoid.
That was never the scenario. The scenario was always the people who keep Black Lives Matter and Antifa on leashes would have unleashed them, as they did all summer.
Or the Michigan militia guys who plan to kidnap the governor, right?
No, that's a funny story. You don't want to blame that on the right because those people are anarchists and they appear to have been led by the FBI. That is a weird story that does not actually add up.
Well, there are what we have seen. Various groups, Proud Boys.
I have not seen one murder or storefront bashed in by the Proud Boys. I don't even know who the Proud Boys are for real, but they are not violent. Whatever they threaten, they haven't acted on it.
Well, one of the takeaways that I see is just that America is extremely divided. You know, the polls had Biden winning by a landslide, but then we see that it's just so divided. It was pretty much 50% of America believes what Trump has his mind frame. So is this a good thing for a country? Is this how a democracy should be, that it should be so close? Or is there something that is wrong or alarming about that and the revelation that this brought up?
It's obviously entirely awful. It's a disaster. So one way or another, it's going to change.
Right. We'll see what happens in the next months with the Biden administration. And thank you so much, Lisa and David, for joining me throughout this show, at the beginning of this year and all the way till the end. Really appreciate your analysis. And thank you, everyone, for watching the 2020 Presidential Race Review.